All right. Hey there, Knicks fans. Happy Monday. It's looking out my window. It was raining a little bit before, but it's otherwise a pretty nice day. Nice day to start the week. Free agency week. The craziest, generally speaking, craziest week of the NBA calendar. And I don't expect this week to be any exception. I mean, I was writing this today's newsletter, and I was kind of trying to, I was writing the intro, and I was like, just thinking about the trades that have already taken place over the last few weeks. I'm like, there's already been like a bunch of really big time players traded, and that doesn't always happen this early in the cycle. I mean, between Jordan Poole and Chris Paul and Kristaps Porzingis and Marcus Smart and Bradley Beal, like it's a lot of movement. It's a lot of movement. A lot of established teams making big moves already. I think probably the most significant, I don't say news, but significant piece that dropped this morning was from Sam Amick of The Athletic. I was just skimming that before. And it basically goes through, I think, what most people would agree at this point are the top two dominoes of the next week, of the next several days, whatever you want to call it, which are in. You could put these in either order: one, two, two, one, whatever. But Damian Lillard and James Harden, because it would seem that those the decisions regarding those players. I was about to say the decisions those players make, but in the case of Damian Lillard, at least it's not entirely up to him. Like they will have a lot of dominoes that will fall as a result of what they may or may not do. So with Dame at this point, seems like it's either stay in Portland or go to Miami. And if he stays in Portland, like how aggressive might they try to get in other ways? You got the Jeremy Grant piece sitting there. He's about to enter unrestricted free agency, looking for a $30 million a year contract. Who might give that money to him if it's not Portland? If Portland does trade Dame, like, are they still going to want to bring Jeremy Grant back? Are they going to do a sign and trade? And then, there's domino effects upon domino effects. If Dame doesn't get traded to Miami, does Miami look to do something else elsewhere? Because, Pat Riley is never one to necessarily sit tight. And then with Harden, it's like, well, if he just leaves, like had been assumed and then more recently wasn't assumed, and now we're kind of wondering if we should rethink our secondary assumption. What does that mean for Joel Embiid? What does that mean for the Philadelphia 76ers? And also, what does it mean for the rest of the free agent marketplace if he stays in Philly? Because the team with the most money out there to spend, the Houston Rockets, they have $60+ million in cap space to spend. Now all of a sudden, if they're not spending, whatever, 40 million of that 60+ million on James Harden, well, are they looking to spend it elsewhere in the marketplace? The interesting thing about all of this that I just went through is that, unlike, I would say, many other years in recent to slightly more than recent memory, the main dominoes, and even if you want to go through some other big dominoes like the Chris Middleton thing with Milwaukee, which obviously that may in and of itself be tied to the Harden thing with Houston, like there's a lot of interconnected stuff going on here. Brook Lopez, we went through Brook Lopez in there. Also, is it Houston? Is it Sacramento? And then you get into the whole Draymond thing with the Kings and all that. None of this stuff, unless look, crazy stuff happens. If there's one rule in the NBA, it's to expect the unexpected. But unless I'm just wildly in the dark, which is, again, certainly possible, I don't think any of these interconnected webs, I don't even know if the offshoots of those webs, I don't know if that analogy makes sense, but just go with it, really impact the Knicks all that much, if at all. There's been, I think, some speculation about, like, other than Portland and Miami, or sorry, other than Miami and Brooklyn, could another Dame team emerge? People always tend to bring up the Knicks whenever a superstar potentially becomes available on the trade market. I've thought about this a lot. We've talked about it a lot. Maybe if somebody wants to talk about it more today, I don't see it right now for a variety of reasons. So there's that. I mean, you want to tell me, maybe there's a possibility that Dame could end up with the Clippers and then George, and then there's a three-way trade involving us. Okay, maybe it's possible, but it feels like the Knicks right now kind of exist to some extent in their own ecosystem, starting with the fact that the one free agent that nobody seems to think is going anywhere, it's almost universally agreed upon at this point. I know Timmy Bontemps, who I was on with Ian on the putback last week, spoke on the Hoop Collective pod this morning. Like, he doesn't think Josh Hart's going anywhere, but he is curious as to, is he going to opt in and give the Knicks a little bit more immediate financial flexibility, or is he going to opt out? And, Jeremy and I went through this all on the pod today. So if you want more info on that, just listen to that podcast. I'm not going to rehash it now. But, like, it is interesting how even the Knicks' biggest domino is, like, almost like a self-contained thing. I guess in terms of, like, starting the week, the biggest question in my head, or the biggest uncertainty, the biggest curiosity in my head is, it, at the very least at this point, based on the available reporting, and then, I mean, to some extent based on common sense, because, like, NBA teams rarely let assets go unused or go to waste. And that's, if you didn't listen to the whole pod with Jeremy and I kind of ended it by saying their mid-level exception, this $12.4 million, that is an asset. I know it's not an asset that is currently attached to a player, but just in a free agent marketplace where there are limited dollars, and if you want to go a step further, there are really limited dollars when it comes to teams that were competitive last year. I mean, if you just look at the league and you look at the play, and you look at the four teams that made it to the second round of the playoffs last year, Milwaukee, Boston, or sorry, excuse me, Miami, Freudian slip, Miami, Boston, Philadelphia, New York, and then over in the West, Denver, the Warriors, the Lakers, and then the Suns. Other than the Lakers, there's only one of those teams that has as much as the Knicks have to spend in terms of, again, this mid-level, and that's the Lakers. And the Lakers kind of have a whole bunch of their own guys that are their concern with bringing back. So they're not really viewed as a destination for, someone like a Dante DiVincenzo. So the fact that the Knicks are, maybe you could argue at least, that they are the best team, again, putting aside the Lakers, that has access to, a salary slot over $10 million, I think that that's meaningful. And I think that's why there are signs pointing to the fact that they maybe think that they could get Dante DiVincenzo, and that DiVincenzo may want to, come here. But it sets up this kind of then guessing game as to, okay, so if they sign Dante DiVincenzo for $12 million, obviously $12 million, you're not going to spend $12 million on someone unless you think they're going to play significant minutes. Dante DiVincenzo is coming off a season for the Warriors in which I think he averaged, I don't know exactly what it was, 25, 26, 27 minutes. Like, he's entering the prime of his career. That dude wants to play, if not starters minutes, like close to starters minutes. He wants to be, at worst, like a seventh man, sixth, seventh man somewhere. So the Knicks just showed you last year they really like this 9-man rotation. Based on the available reporting, I know we've all spitballed, like you go to a 10-man rotation, and maybe that's something they do temporarily, but like something about that doesn't pass the smell test, that they're automatically going to go to a 10-man rotation. So if they go out and they get DiVincenzo, what does that mean? Does it mean that they have a consolidation trade lined up where they're sending out two current wing players, most likely, because Dante DiVincenzo's a wing, to bring in another wing? But then you run into dead ends, because it's like, okay, who's the wing they're bringing in. You get into these like big names, and there's all kinds of issues with all of these names. And again, we've been talking about it a lot. I don't need to rehash. So that's kind of maybe a dead end, or not a dead end, but like, okay, that doesn't pass the smell test. Okay, you trade Obi for a future pick or someone who's more of a nominal backup 4, but doesn't really need to play. And if he doesn't need to play, do you really feel good about that trade? If you're the Knicks, you're going to have someone that's like half in the rotation, half out of the rotation. That's not really something they do either. And again, if it was someone who was more out of the rotation than in, but it's more of a nominal 4, well, okay, then you go in RJ Barrett or Josh Hart, basically full-time as your backup 4. I mean, I'd kind of love that. But again, I'm not quite sure if it passed the smell test for me. So, and then there's option 3, which I don't know, maybe it's the most likely option, which is they just don't spend this money. But again, that doesn't pass the smell test because the Knicks, if nothing else, over the course of the Leon Rose regime and by extension the Brock Aller era, they don't waste assets. They don't let asset opportunities, shall we say, go to waste. And then, hovering over all of this is the fact that you look at next year's draft and they are slated to have 4 picks in all likelihood, their pick, the Dallas first round pick, and then probably 2 early second round picks. That's going to be 4 draft picks that might be between the 20th and 40th pick in the draft. Well, again, we've seen other teams be in this position before, a couple of them in this draft, where you're not getting necessarily the best value if you try to consolidate those. And then we've seen the Knicks be in this position when they made a trade that everybody kills the Cam Reddish acquisition. The Cam Reddish acquisition was not the original sin. The original sin was getting to a point where you had the 19th and 21st pick in a draft where you did not want to use 2 picks in that range. So that was the one time you could argue that they were kind of pressed up against the wall and they didn't make a great deal. Might they have learned their lesson? I'm not saying they needed to learn the lesson, but might they have taken note of how that situation unfolded? And now, a year ahead of a draft where they might have 4 picks in this kind of 20 pick range, be looking to get out ahead of this and okay, can we package one or multiple of those picks with something, whether it's an Obi Toppin or whatever, to try to do something there. But again, that doesn't necessarily answer any of the questions that I just spouted off before. So for as much as the Knicks are not connected to any of the big stuff, for as much as we don't, at this point, it doesn't seem like there's a superstar or even a star trade on the immediate horizon. There is a lot of uncertainty for me as to what is going to unfold in the next, whatever it is, 76 hours, 77 hours, 78 hours, whatever, or whereabouts. So that's it. That's all I have to say to start. I imagine we have some questions. I will be on here for about the next half hour. I'm going to try to get through as many as I can. So without further ado, we got one start us off from Drew P. Of all this, and this is right off the bat, kind of what I was talking about. Of all the scenarios that could happen this offseason, do you think losing Obi and getting Dante is the most likely outcome with no other changes to the rotation? Also, will Taj get the vet minimum here? I had the Taj Gibson thing had not even crossed my mind. I suppose Taj could be back. I think that's probably like a day 12 thing as opposed to a day 5 or day 2 or day 1 thing. Certainly possible, though. As far as do I think in a vacuum, without considering all of the offshoots, and like I just went through, there's a lot of offshoots. Do I think the most likely scenario is we lose Obi and we pick up Dante DiVincenzo? Yes. I think it's the most likely, and yet I don't think I would put like a 50% outcome, or even maybe like a 35% outcome on that, because again, that presupposes that they're going to roll with like a smaller than usual backup unit with I guess Josh Hart at the 4. I know Tibbs talked about that they're comfortable with that, and they may be comfortable with that. Again, that's kind of at this point what I'm rooting for, because like if you think about what that would look like, IQ, DiVincenzo, Hart, and RJ, or RJ and Hart in whichever order you want, with Hartenstein. Man, that's a fun and skilled backup group. And you want to talk about a backup group that is really versatile defensively putting aside Hartenstein, like RJ is your worst defender in that backup unit. So that's kind of cool. That's exciting. Yeah, I do think that's the most likely outcome. And for me, it would show me that the Knicks are perhaps thinking a little bit more creatively than I'm probably giving them credit for. But yeah, I would say so. I think it's true. Slay from Florida. Hey, John. Not a huge fan of getting Cat, but if New York does get him to play the 5 with Randall, here, is it possible they would target someone like OG to play small forward with Grimes to insulate the other subpar areas? Okay. For one, John Krasinski, who's as good a beat reporter for putting aside Nick beat reporters, John Krasinski is as good a beat reporter as there is in the NBA. Extraordinarily clued in to the Timberwolves and what's going on there. I want to be very clear. He has not outright reported anything regarding Karl Anthony Towns. But he had a piece that came out this morning in regards to them re-signing Naz Reid last night, and read through the entire piece. Long piece. Strongly recommend anyone with an athletic subscription to go read. And if you don't have an athletic subscription, you should have one. They run like $1 a month deals all the time. That piece, as I read it, struck me as this is a team that certainly is not shopping Cat. And at this point, maybe not would have to be blown away by an offer for Karl Anthony Towns, but like feel like they're getting 90 cents on the dollar at least right now. Because it doesn't seem like they feel like they got a representative sample size last season. And like, I don't know the Cat's value has ever been lower. Could you argue that he's easier to trade now because his extension kicks in next July 1st? Absolutely. Doesn't mean he's impossible to trade in a year. At the very least, like if they go out and they look better and he looks better, like he'll certainly be easier to trade than he is right now because he'll just be worth a lot more, or he'll get a lot back in return because the contract's not changing in a year. It goes up, but it's the same contract. You know, if that makes sense. All that being said, I don't think they're in the back of my mind. He's always been the most likely star that ends up here because of all the obvious reasons. CAA, Kentucky. I do think the Tibbs Cat stuff in terms of like Cat never wants to play for Tibbs again. Tibbs never wants to coach Cat again. I think all that stuff's been overblown. And I also just think Tibbs, he's like, even though he's coached Cat before and it didn't really work, I think he's like any coach. He's always going to believe that he's going to have the answer. And you want to talk about Tibbs being stubborn? You know? So I know I'm dancing around. I haven't actually answered your question. If they traded for Cat to play the 5 and they kept Randall here, then almost without question, RJ would be going out in that deal. So then you'd have Brunson, Grimes, Randall, and Cat, which, I mean, my God, defensively. So at that point, do I think that they would try to target a big-time defense-first wing to play the 3? Yeah, absolutely. The problem is, almost without question, if you're trading for Cat, and you're trading for OG Anunoby, that's it. That's all your assets. You've traded all of your firsts between those two deals, and you've traded in some combination of those two deals, certainly two of RJ, Quickly, and Grimes. I suspect it would be RJ and Quickly. And like Obi or whatever else. So, but like you're basically you get to keep one of the kids, and I think it'd be Grimes. And if you want to say Deuce too, is that a title team? I mean, you're going headfirst into the tax, to say nothing of probably maybe the second apron in a couple of years. So you better goddamn well hope that's a title team. Is that their finish line? Are they comfortable with that being their finish line? The Knicks, I mean. Not say you couldn't make another move, not say you couldn't flip Randall at some point down the line, or OG at some point down the line, or whoever else someplace. I mean, never say never. There's always moves to be made, but like that's as all in as this. I can imagine this team going this summer. I don't see it. But again, in your theoretical example, do I think would they look to shore up defense elsewhere at a prominent starting lineup position if they went out and got Cat to play with Randall? Absolutely. Here we go. This lets you know about everything. It lets you know everything you need to know about where the Phoenix Suns are at. Phoenix Suns will host free agent workout on Wednesday featuring notables Jabari Parker and Stanley Johnson. Okay, then. JG, what's going on, JG? After listening to the recent pod, the more and more I think LaVine is the best move, meaning bye-bye to RJ. Say hello to DiVincenzo through free agency. Can we get Bay for Obi and be the Nova Knicks, LOL? I think the Hawks seem to be wanting to move around other salaries so they can extend Bay. It would seem very, very. I know that's like you're asking that kind of facetiously. It would seem strange for a team that has a guy entering his last year of his rookie contract that they seem to really like, and it seems to fit in there. I'm talking about Bay, for that team to swap that guy for a guy in Obi who's kind of like a lesser version of the guy they already have, and they're paying $25 million a year to, who they can't wait to get rid of. In John Collins. So I don't know if I see that. As far as LaVine, is he the best move? I mean, we went through four moves. We went through four names today, or on today's pod. Towns, Paul George, LaVine, and Zion. Zion's not happening. That's not a realistic possibility. More news. Pistons plan to make a aggressive push for Cam Johnson, possibly at $100 million range. Wow. It's funny. It's like, I remember when the Otto Porter offer sheet, that was 100, and it seemed crazy. It was crazy at the time, but it was like not. It was crazy, but it was like, okay, you kind of got it. And now we're like so many years past that, the cap is so much higher, and somehow Cam Johnson seems like for $100 million seems maybe even crazier, but he's a good player. Anyway, on the LaVine thing, yes, put Zion's not happening. LaVine or Paul George at the same price, I find to be an interesting discussion, which is right off the bat a faulty premise, because I don't think that they would go for the same price point. I think LaVine would cost more. And I think I have a funny feeling if they ever did a George trade, they would wind up giving up less than people might imagine that they would give up, at the same time giving up more than what people would want them to give up. LaVine, knowing how this front office operates and knowing how this organization, how much they seem to value, like, I don't even know how to put this. I can't. All I could think of is like a Fast and the Furious joke. It's like, I don't have friends, I have family. Like, I think that's how like Leon and to a larger extent Wes run the Knicks. and you're either in or you're out. And like to bring in a clutch guy where there's going to potentially be some acrimony behind the scenes there. I don't know if I see it, but we'll see. See what happens. Crazier shit, right? Dylan Kitts, what's going on, Dylan? John, what about the idea of trading the Detroit pick and Toppin back to Detroit for Isaiah Stewart? Save some money, get a tips type guy for his slot. So, to me, this is a question about positional. Put aside the price for a second. I think trading a first round pick, even a protected first round pick like this, because I'll look it up. I think the Detroit pick eventually gets down to top 10 protections. If it's not top 10, it's definitely top 12. And that's like 3 years out, I think. So like I think there's a pretty good chance that pick conveys and conveys maybe somewhere in the middle of the first round. So am I going to want to trade a pick in the middle of the first round and Obi Toppin, who may have some value still, for Isaiah Stewart? I don't think Isaiah Stewart has shown that he's anywhere near that level of player that he would warrant that sort of outlay in assets. So that would be a no for me. But for me, that's just more of a question about like positionality in the NBA and versatility right now. And to me, like, I know the NBA has changed a lot in recent years. To me, it's still more, you want guys that could play down a position as opposed to guys who could play up a position. I think I phrased that poorly. Let me just say what the hell I mean. So like, if you're trading for Isaiah Stewart, I think you're trading for Isaiah Stewart as a guy who, Isaiah Stewart's a 5. I think if you were going to give out a significant outlay, like with what you're talking about, or protect the first round pick and Obi Toppin for a backup 4, or a guy who's going to play your backup 4, I think you're going to want to do it for a guy who is on the surface a backup 4, but he can play backup 5, as opposed to a guy who is clearly best suited to be a backup 5 and like could give you minutes at the backup 4 because the Knicks already have their centers, and like Isaiah Stewart is, I think, best suited as a 5. Again, can he play some backup 4? Yeah, he can play some backup 4, but I don't think that's where you're getting the most value for him. I think you're getting the most value for him as a backup 5. And if you're trading for him and he's going to be pretty much exclusively your backup 4, I just don't see the value there. Yeah, but that's me. Junon, what's going on, Junon? Thoughts on the Tobias Harris drama going on in Philly? Also, I'm fascinated by Christian Wood. You know who's not fascinated by Christian Wood? The Dallas Mavericks. That was a funny part of the Windy Pod from today. I don't want him anywhere near the Knicks, but how could a player so talented and awful be so talented and awful at the same time? Who brings him in? It's such a great question. And thank you for the generous contribution, Junan. You're always so kind, and it doesn't matter. I do these things during the day, do them 7 o'clock at night, do them at 2 in the morning, and you find a way to hop on. It really does. Thank you. Means a lot. Wood is a fascinating player, and I just wonder, has he worn out his welcome at one too many places at this point to feel like, for a team to feel like he's a worthy investment? Like, the Mavs essentially traded for him on a 1-year deal, and they don't want him back. So if you're another team, like, are you giving him multiple guaranteed years? I mean, if anything, maybe somebody gives him a big 1+1 where the second year is a team option or a very small guarantee. But like, if you're a team that's trying to win the championship, do you want that guy? And by the way, here that's the other part of it, right? All the teams that are trying to win a championship, they don't have the money to pay that guy. So you're talking about, okay, well, where's your championship contender that's pulling off a sign and trade for that dude? Which would mean ostensibly you're giving up something valuable to go back to Dallas because Dallas is accommodating the sign and trade. I don't know. And if you're a team that's like building from the ground up, is that the dude you want to bring in? So you're left with like, who's, I don't know, who's bringing him in? Like, does Charlotte want him? I don't know. It sounds crazy to say, but maybe he's a guy that like, it's just sitting there. And then you find out on day 9 or day 10 of free agency, like Christian Wood signs for the 1-year vet minimum and it's some contender that's like, maybe he actually plays for them. Maybe he actually sees minutes for them. Maybe he rehabs his value, kind of like what Dennis Schroeder ended up doing in Boston after he turned down, what was it, 4 for $80 million? Like he ended up signing 1-year vet minimum or whatever it was. It might've been like the buyout. It's some small number. And then he went back and, he may get paid. He's rehabbed his value a little bit. The Tobias Harris drama going on in Philly. Look, I think Tobias Harris is a good player. What's tough about it is it's clearly he's too good to be a 4. He gets paid too much to be a 4. He doesn't want to be a 4. I mean, when I say a 4, I mean 4th guy on the totem pole. So then it's like, okay, where is he going to be a 3rd banana where that works? I could see him being a really successful 3rd banana somewhere. Do I have any thoughts on it? Not really. Other than that, Daryl Morey stared down Ben Simmons, guy who brought the fucking cell phone out onto the practice court, and that got into all kinds of really unpleasantness with fines and all this other, nonsense. Are they willing? Like, I think they would be willing to stare down Tobias Harris and be like, look, dude, you're on an expiring contract. Come show up to camp. We'll try to find a new home for you if we can. But if there's not a deal that we like, we're not going to make it. That's how I see it unfolding. But because the other side of the coin is always like, okay, if you're Philly and you're trying to win a championship, you're not going to sell low on the guy. So who's the team ponying up real stuff for Tobias Harris on an expiring $30 million contract? And I don't, unless it's some team that just has, like, I don't know, are the Kings just open up all this cap space? If they can't do anything that they thought they were going to be able to do with their cap space, do they just trade a lesser piece and like a future first to bring in Tobias Harris? And it's a piece that Philly feels like, you know what, at the end of the day, he could do for us what Tobias did for us, and we just kind of rejigger our rotation. Like, I don't know. I don't know if I see a trade. Thanks, June. I appreciate you as always, man. Kevin, what's going on? Kevin Danishevsky coming out with my article where my thesis, oh boy, Kevin Danishevsky and thesis in the same sentence that's just scary stuff. Scary stuff. My thesis is the only thing the Knicks need to do is get rid of one of RJ and Randall. Any way to flip either for picks and salary? Sure, there's a way to flip either for picks and salary. It's not a matter of whether or not they could. It's a matter of whether or not they would, and I guess to a certain extent whether or not they should. That's a fun thought exercise. And again, I feel like there's enough to write about and talk about that it's not a thought exercise that I would probably do. Maybe if I didn't have a wife and kids and I was just sitting home all day with my laptop thinking of shit to write, I would do this. But given that time is limited, I don't think I would do this. But the thought exercise would be this: go through every team in the NBA and think about if all you're doing, your goal is to unload RJ or Julius for either unwanted salary or like not good salary. like salary that's like, it's fine. It's like, Duncan Robinson. Well, that's bad salary, but like, Bertans, that's also bad salary. The problem is there's not a whole lot of, there's very little bad salary. And there's not even a whole lot of like neutral salary out there. Everything's either like bad salary and there's not a lot of that left, or it's like salary that's like at least neutral. And then if it's neutral salary, you're going to want to like get something back. So like the very premise of your question is kind of tough. But even, to make it more fun, you could even do it with some of the cap space teams. You could include some of the cap space teams like the Spurs. Like how many picks would the Spurs give up for RJ? And what picks would those be? Would they give up picks alone, for Julius Randle? And if you want to have, like Doug McDermott, slightly worse than neutral salary, I guess, coming back on one of those deals. Like, again, but go through that thought exercise with every NBA team and find a team who would give up the most for Randle, who would give up the most for RJ, just specifically that type of deal that you're talking about. And then see which of those would, like, what's the highest return for either player? And then ask yourself, would the Knicks do either of those? My guess is you'd get the highest return for RJ. I don't know what the team is, though. Like, what's the team that's given like the premium, like blue chip? Like, what's the best pick you're getting from another team for RJ Barrett? I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know. Anyway, sorry. David Crockett, my man. What's going on, David? What's up, Mac? Got to give a little late love to the whole KFS crew for their work so far this offseason. Hashtag much love. Hashtag KFS. David Crockett, you're my longtime. I mean, I don't know who the Mount Rushmore is of people that I get to interact with on social media, but you're on it because you never bring any nonsense. It's always high level stuff. And if it's not a high level basketball thought, it's something like this where you're just being super kind. So, thank you, man. Hope the summer's going well for you so far. I don't know if your academic year is over, but if so, happy summer. And then Eduardo Nunez, ideas on the Knicks pursuing DeJounte Murray. And then D. Mitch. I'm assuming he means Donovan Mitchell. I don't think Donovan Mitchell trade's happening this summer. DeJounte Murray, someone that has been asked about. All indications are that Atlanta is trying to move other salary to try to keep Murray. I keep going back to what they gave up to get him, what they're going to need to feel good about any trade that sends him out, and just their like what are their organizational prerogatives? Their organizational prerogatives are very, very, very clearly to win. They have Trae Young. They have a bunch of like guys who, again, the pieces don't match, and like there's a talent gap between them and being like a real contender, but like there's something going on there. They're certainly not going to pivot into any kind of a tank. So if they're trading DeJounte Murray, they are trying to trade DeJounte Murray to make their team better, or like at the very least not worse, while saving themselves some money. Well, the Knicks can't save them any money because the Knicks can't, other than like a few $1 million or something, depending. Actually, they don't even have the salaries that up to do that. And then if you're the Knicks and you're like, let's say you could find a trade where you're sending stuff that would make Atlanta happy with DeJounte Murray coming back to the Knicks, you got to ask yourself, okay, well, why are the Knicks doing that? One, I don't think let me save that for a second. One, he's a flight risk because he's not going to extend even 140% of his current number. He's not signing for that. He's going to want more than that. He's going to take it to free agency. He will absolutely be a flight risk. And there's been talk about him wanting to end up in LA for a while now. That's number one. And number two, I don't see it. I don't see the fit. I don't see the fit with, I know obviously he could defend, but I think the whole value of having DeJounte Murray is he is a guy who has more than enough skill and talent to be a real point guard. Not saying best player on a championship team. I'm not even saying second best player on a championship team, but like you want to put that dude next to whether it's a big time wing and like a really skilled center or like two big time wings or whatever, but like he can run the show, You got to surround him with a lot of shooting. The Knicks don't have that shooting. Like but his skill is like, or his biggest thing he brings to the table, he could have the ball a lot, and he needs the ball a lot because he's not a great shooter, and he brings you defense that you want to maximize the value of that defense at the point guard position. That's the value. So I know they just put him with Trae Young. I never saw that as being the best way to maximize his value. I don't see this maximizing his value being next to Jalen Brunson, but that's just me. All right. That's it. This flew by, man. Wow. Okay. I got to run. You guys got to run. Get back to whatever you're doing in the middle of the day. I'll be back. We got one more. Hold on. Paul DeSantis. What's going on, Paul? Great start to the KFS offseason. If they did sign Dante DiVincenzo, how does he fit into the rotation? You and JC sort of touched on that, but who gets moved? Thanks. Very simply, the part of the problem is I don't see an obvious thing unless an obvious spot in the rotation, unless it's a significant consolidation trade where you're sending two of your big time rotation players, young rotation players out and bringing back some kind of star or star-ish player. It's got to be either that or it's Obi going out and you're just having a very small backup or a small-ish backup unit. That's really... So either Obi goes out or like two other rotation players go out and a star comes back. Those are the only possibilities I see. Okay, now we're done. Thanks for tuning in to day one of KFS Lunch Break during free agency week. We'll be back tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel, noon. And then also don't forget live shows every night this week. Check out those. And then the big show, me and Friday. Me and Friday, boy. I haven't had enough coffee yet today. Me and Jeremy on Friday at 5 p.m. sharp. And tonight, Benji and DJ together. Benji Ritholtz, DJ Zulo, 9 p.m. Be here, be square. We will talk to you later. Peace out.